While I was working at a hospital in town, I had the opportunity to come in contact with many ghosts. I worked on the geriatric floor, and elderly people died there every day. If the power suddenly went out and immediately came back on, a person had just died. This happened every time. One of the most notable apparitions that I've personally seen was a man with a cane that is seen wandering the halls at night. People admitted to the hospital would often report tapping sounds and seeing an old man's face grinning at them from the hospital door, which all of them had. One lady of about 80 kept telling me that she saw this man's face in the mirror in the bathroom, and that half of his face would look badly beaten and disfigured. There have been reports of a cloaked man praying over the dead bodies of the recently departed. I can remember one incident where I walked into the morgue and I saw a body that was recently pronounced dead and covered. I could have sworn that I saw the fading presence of this monk kneeling over the body for a few seconds, then disappear. I would feel the air in the room be so cold, but after he vanished, it warmed up. Another popular ghost at the hospital was the Grim Reaper. The Reaper was a dark figure that would come through the window at the end of the hallway. He would shut doors, touch you on the shoulder, etc. Late at night, you could feel that someone was there, and you would see a dark figure out of the corner of your eye. As soon as you looked up, he was gone. My favorite story to tell is this. I was helping a woman get her bath early one morning. I was asking her how she slept, how she felt, etc. She told me that she did not get a wink of sleep because of the man's face she saw in the window. She said that she thought it was tree branches, but she got up in the middle of the night and saw that it was a man's face staring at her through the window. This woman was just in the hospital for a kidney infection. She wasn't on any drugs that would make her hallucinate. On third shift, you could hear children giggling and hear them running up and down the halls, but there are no children on the floor. If you went past the operating room at night, it would be locked, but inside, you could hear instruments clanging and things being thrown around. Haunted church stories seem to be popping up frequently lately, and I'm here to say that I have a brief story that will involve just that. There's this Catholic church that I used to constantly clean. This was in Vermont, and the church had to have been built in the late part of the 19th century. Very beautiful windows, looked immaculate. Anyway, I used to work as a janitor cleaning the halls late at night, when I would be the only one there. There were many times when I would hear the organ notes playing repeatedly. I would hear the echoes of human voices speaking together, like whispers, and sometimes even clear words. One night, I was cleaning around the church once again. I was all the way at the end of the church when I heard the organs going off. It wasn't the usual sound either. It sounded monstrous, as if someone was literally stomping on the organs. I looked immediately in the direction of where the organ sounds were coming from, and I could have sworn I saw a cloaked figure at the organ and playing it. It was the typical transparent-looking apparition, and when I walked even closer to get a better look, the figure had seemed to disappear. That was, of course, the worst of what I had witnessed, but there were times where I would see the organ once again playing by itself. I'd see a note or two being pushed down by itself when nobody else was in the room, and it was quiet. Anyway, that's all I have to report. I don't work at this church anymore, I'm happy to say, but I thought it was worth sharing. I wish I could say that this wasn't a real experience, but unfortunately, I can't. At least this will always make for an entertaining read. My name is Shannon. I'll be 18 in 11 days. I live in Georgia, and I'm writing to you because I feel so alone. For as long as I can remember, I've dealt with ghosts. I don't know what they are or what they want from me, but they seem to follow me. For the first 5 years of my life, I lived in a trailer in Mississippi. I can only recall one incident from them because I was so young. I remember it was a beautiful day in spring, and I was sitting on a picnic table in our backyard, making mud pies, when suddenly I heard what I thought to be my mother's voice calling me from the woods. I started to follow it. The closer I got, the further out into the deep woods the voice seemed to go. I almost followed it all the way into the woods, thinking my mother was calling me, but suddenly I heard my mother's real voice calling me from the trailer. I turned and saw her waiting for me next to the picnic table, so I ran back and told her what had happened. She, of course, said that it was my imagination. About 12 years ago, our family moved here to Hiram. Every single night for years, I was terrified to sleep because I saw shadow people. They were like three-dimensional shadows that looked like people. I saw them in my room at night after my parents would put me to bed. When I'd call my parents into the room, they would turn on a light and the shadow people would be gone. They said it was my imagination. Lots of other things have happened, and there have been witnesses to some of the events. The house will shake at times. The doors will open and close on their own. I've seen dolls move on their own. A glass has exploded in my hand for no reason. I know glasses will explode from temperature changes, but there was no change in temperature at all. There was a music box that music would play in other rooms of the house when the music box wasn't around. I've heard footsteps when no one was home or awake. I've heard voices. The list goes on. I thought maybe that there was something wrong with me, so I went to a psychiatrist. She said that there's nothing wrong with me. I've learned to verify that I'm really hearing something, because even my cats notice something and hear a lot of things. If they hear it too, their ears perk up. I've tried talking about it before, and they either don't believe me and think I'm making it up, or they think I'm crazy. I really feel alone, and it would be nice if you could give me some sort of guidance. What should I do? Should I do anything? Well, I apologize for the long email. I'm sure that you get a lot of mail every day, and I hate to add to the pile. Thank you for your time. My name is Luann. I'm 19 years old and live in a little redneck town in Virginia. I live with my grandparents and have lived all my life. My mom was 14 and in the 8th grade. My mom had a very best friend named Wendy, who was 13. They did everything together. Soon after our house was built, Wendy's parents were not getting along and were going through some separation and divorce procedures. Wendy and her mother had moved to Woodbridge, Virginia, soon. During the time of the separation, Wendy spent a great deal at my mom's newly built house. They spent much of their time in my mom's room, which is now my room. Then came the time for Wendy and her mom to move. It was very early one morning. Wendy was in the back of the van, holding a glass coffee table steady. This was in the days before seatbelt laws. There was a drunk driver on the road and hit the van head on. Everyone made it out with semi-serious or minor injuries, but not Wendy. The corner of the glass coffee table hit her in the head and killed her instantly. Years later, in 1985, a week before my mom found out she was pregnant with me, she was in the family room talking to my grandparents about going on birth control. My grandmother and my uncle both caught a glimpse of a girl standing behind my mother, and after that 2-second glimpse, she was gone. My uncle and grandmother agreed that it looked like Wendy. Oh, and she was actually shaking her head when she appeared. We believe that she was shaking her head because she knew my mom was pregnant and didn't want her to go on birth control. Ever since then, everyone in my family has caught a glimpse of her in our house. I usually never get any negative feelings when she materializes, but there was one moment I witnessed her ghost that completely terrified me. I was in the shower, I was home alone, and I had the door completely wide open. It was late evening, and I heard the door to the bathroom slam shut. It startled me so much, so I got dressed and headed out the door. I could have sworn I heard my name being called in a gentle, quiet whisper. It sounded like a little girl. I go downstairs and walk into the living room, and then I see the lights flickering. I also start to hear the sounds of footsteps walking across our hardwood floors. At this point, I thought I had an intruder in the house. I go to call the police, and after I hang up, I rush upstairs to hide in my bedroom. The thing was, as I was running upstairs, I could have sworn I saw the presence of a little girl, in black, in the corner of my eye as I ran for the stairs. It was only for a couple seconds, and of course, my mind was just thinking about hiding from this intruder. I could have just been seeing things, but I swear, I saw a girl for a second. The police showed up, of course, couldn't find anyone, and all was quiet. My parents came home, and I told them what happened. They were just happy that I was safe. It wasn't until a few days later that I realized it could have been Wendy. Because my room used to be my mom's room, she's in my room most of the time. I feel her presence there a lot. When I'm upset, no matter where I am in the house, I can feel her there. No one has seen her until my mom became pregnant. My family believes that she was sent to watch over her best friend's daughter. This happened to my cousin and I in Lato too, in a ranch-style house my family and I used to live in. My cousin woke up in the middle of the night to my voice, or so she thought it was my voice. She looked at me, and I was sound asleep and not talking. Also that night, it was probably 4 or 5 in the morning, and I felt someone pecking on my knee, and it wasn't my cousin because she was sound asleep. So I just thought it was my imagination. As we were eating that morning, my cousin had told me what she had heard. I freaked because I knew that whatever had pecked me on my knee was not my imagination. Nothing was ever actually seen in this house, but a lot of things were felt and heard. A few months after that incident, my cousin was staying the night again. Everyone in the house had been asleep for 2 or 3 hours, but my cousin, she was so addicted to the game The Sims, and she was still on the computer. As she was shutting down the computer, she heard voices coming from the hallway directly to her right. She looked down there and saw nothing. The voices she heard, she knew were not any of ours, so she ran to the floor where she had made her bed and covered her head up. I guess the voices must have stopped after that. A lot of times I would hear cabinets shut, dishes clank together, and other odd unexplainable noises. One night, my brother got home from a friend's house around 1 or 2 in the morning. I'd been asleep on the couch in the living room for at least 4 hours, and my parents had been asleep in their room for about the same amount of time. As my brother got out of his car, he looked towards the door that went directly into the living room from the outside. It had a little window on it. He could see the light from the TV that I always left on at night, but he also saw a black figure looking at him from the inside. He ran in the house and noticed I was on the couch sound asleep. Then he went into my parents' room and asked if they'd been up, and they hadn't. What is scary is that the thing was in the same room with me. The next night, I slept on the couch again. Do not ask me why. My brother was not home yet, and my parents had went to bed. I was watching TV, and I got kind of uneasy, so I laid down and covered up my head. After a while, I heard the glasses in the kitchen sink clanking together. I started to sweat. Then I felt as if someone was coming into the living room, where I was. When my brother arrives home and the noises stop, I got up and looked at the dishes in the sink, and none of them had been moved. About 14 years ago, we moved into a house that was built in the 1950s. I believe that used to be a boarding house and was right in front of a cemetery. There were lots of noises heard there, and a few spirits as well. I remember staying home one day from school, and my mom was asleep because she worked nights, and I heard a voice say my name. It scared me because we were the only ones home, and it was a voice I had never heard before. My mom would be home during the day by herself, while my brother and I were at school, and she would hear a music box playing. At the time, we had music boxes, but they did not play the song she heard. My mom would be sleeping on the couch, and she would hear footsteps coming through the kitchen, which was right next to the living room where she was. One time, when that happened, she grabbed her shoes and didn't come back till we got out of school. She also would be sleeping in her bed, and it would start shaking. This also happened to me. The shed in this house was directly behind my parents' bedroom, because their bedroom used to be a garage. Well, anyway, my mom would be lying on her bed, and she would hear someone or something walking in there. The odd thing was, it sounded like boots on wood, but the floor in there was concrete. We had a little dog out there at the time, but there is no way it could have sounded like that when it walked. One night, my mom, dad, and brother, we were all sleeping in my room because we put the air conditioner in there in the summer. Well, anyway, it was a cool night, so they had turned the air off and left the door open. My mom, for some reason, looked at the doorway and felt as if there was a presence there. She just put her face into my dad's back and went to sleep. The next day, she found out that her beloved dad had died, who lived in Kansas, and hadn't been found for a few days. She believes that it was him in the doorway. My brother saw a ghostly head in his bathroom one night. It was in a mist and was bald on top with hair around the edges of his head. We believe it was my great-grandpa. This happened at my grandma's house on September 2nd, 2004. It was my grandma's birthday and my mom, my little cousin, and I went there to have cake and ice cream. Well, my little cousin decides she wants a Miracle Whip sandwich. She pressed up against the door frame, asking my grandma if she could have a sandwich, when all of a sudden, she looked towards the microwave in the kitchen and screams, drops the jar, and runs to the couch where my grandma is, and my little is crying hysterically. We were all like, what just happened? For some reason, I became very cold and got goosebumps and had the urge to sit up. My little cousin wouldn't tell us what she saw. My grandma tried to tell us it was a mouse or a bug, but I highly doubt it, because she wouldn't have acted like she did. My grandma believes in ghosts, but I think she said that to make herself feel better, because she knew she was going to be there alone when we left. My little cousin, I believe, has forgotten about the incident, so I did not know what happened. Other things have happened at the grandma's, like something kicked her bed very hardly one night, and she also seen the spirit of a young girl dressed in white one day while lying on her couch in her living room. She's seen a shadow-like figure outside her window, which she knows wasn't a human because her cat started hissing and acting weird, and there's probably been other things that happened that I do not know about. I don't believe I've actually ever seen a spirit, but I know I felt them because in certain places, or sometimes when I talk about the spirits, the back of my neck starts to hurt and feels weird, and sometimes my head will start hurting. I have so many stories to share with you, but I will send them at a later time. My cousin and I were out in Glenpool, towards the boondocks where my grandparents used to live, watching TV late at night. We weren't really tired, hyped up on caffeine from Pepsi and Sprite, just hanging out and trying to see how long we could go without passing out to sleep. At first, I thought I was just hearing things, or my cousin thought I was being a jerk and screwing around. But the louder the sound got, and closer, that's when we both turned the volume down. We then went to turn to each other and ask the same question. Was that you? Did you hear that? Of course, it was like a scratching, shuffling sound outside, and we both dismissed it, thinking that perhaps it was the family pets or wild animal, since the house was out in the middle of nowhere. Instead, curiosity got the better of us. I suggested that maybe it was a ghost, and she promptly crawled towards the window for a peek. She didn't say anything, standing still, like if she moved something would see her. I started to talk, but she silenced me with the wave of her hand. When I got over to the glass, I stared off into the black yard, expecting to see a deer or something. Instead, what I saw was a thing. Best word used to describe it. It was all black, nearly invisible in the shadows it clung to. The only way we were able to see it all was due to a distant light pole. It was skirting around. I guess the dogs must have felt the tension in the air, because at that moment, they all went into wild barks at this intruder. It swung its head, or what seemed like a head, towards the sound of the barks, then up to the window we both watched it from. There was nothing there, no face, nothing at all. Needless to say, both of us were terrified to see a hooded, faceless figure staring back at us. It disappeared, melting into the shadows. The dogs yipped, dashing for cover. Both me and my cousin were cold, shocked, afraid, and speechless. We don't know what it was looking for in our yard, or what it was at all. I used to believe it was a person thinking of robbing our house, or at least I tell myself that so I don't get freaked. Though the truth seems a lot creepier, it is still the truth, and neither I nor my cousin can deny that. When I was 11 years old, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to hear the sound of my dad plowing our driveway. He soon left for work, and I couldn't fall back asleep. After all was quiet, I got out of my bunk bed and climbed down my stairs and walked into the hallway. I went to the bathroom and then back to my room. I climbed into bed and crawled over towards my pillow. It was then that I turned around and was about to pull my blankets over me when I noticed two bright green lights in the corner of my room, directly in front of me. They were glowing and hovering in the same spot I just walked through. I was confused and tried to think of all the possible things they could be. Smoke alarm light? Glow-in-the-dark plastic stars? Anything? I started to get more scared as the time passed, because I tried to eliminate the fact that it could be a spirit. I tried to figure out if it was my eyes playing tricks on me. Perhaps I saw the lights from a clock, and my eyes just needed to adjust to the darkness. I didn't turn any lights on while I got up. I blinked my eyes in a different spot on my wall, and tried to see if the lights would follow my eyes. They didn't. At this point, I looked back to the spot and there they were. I was so scared. They were eyes, and they were staring at me. I was terrified. I couldn't move at all. I was laying down resting on my elbows, just staring at them. They moved forward a foot or so, very slowly. Then, they moved back, and just as slowly, vanished to the left through my wall. I was so scared they would come back, and that's the end of the story. Riverdale Road has a lot more than just that certain place by 132nd. Riverdale Road is spooky throughout the entire road. It's weird. Sometimes the road stretches and shrinks. The bad side of the road actually starts on 104th, North Glen, and goes all the way to the end of the Highway 7, Boulder. But anyway, from 104th to Highway 7 is approximately 13 to 15 miles. I was paying attention to the mileage, and I was going about 35 to 40 the entire time. I started at 104th, and by the time I got to Highway 7, I had only gone 9 miles when I turned around to go back the other way towards 104th again. When I got there, I went 16 miles. Now tell me that isn't creepy. If you pay real close attention to the road, you could almost see it stretching. There's also this turn called Dead Man's Curve. It's a real sharp turn. The recommended speed is 25, but easily done at 40. There's a cement block wall bordering one side of the turn. If you turn that corner around 2:30 a.m., you will see a woman in the middle of the road, holding her hands up, waving for you to stop. When I went around that corner, I didn't have time to stop, because she's right there, after you do a half 90-degree turn. I ended up hitting her. I got out of my car and looked all around. Absolutely no one was around, but there were handprints on the hood of the car. Also, if you turn onto Riverdale from 112th and turn left, there will be a huge line of trees on the either side, and it just looks like a dark cave of trees. And there's a very mean jogger spirit that hitchhikes and jogs around there. My sister and I were driving around on that road and went through that little cave of trees, and she said she first got a glimpse of the light on his shoes on the left side going away from 104th, and as you get closer you can see that it's a person, and he was holding out his hands for hitchhiking. Then, all of a sudden knelt down in the running position, and as soon as we got close enough, he jetted out in front of us. My sister said that there were bodily fluids and body parts all over on the windshield, and she blinked, and it was all gone. She said as soon as he knelt down getting ready to run, she saw that his face was just a skull, and his hand was bones. So yeah, it's not just that spot right by 132nd. There are millions of ghost and spirit stories for that road, believe me. I've gone up and down that road billions of times. I used to do it about 5 to 7 times a day for about a year, so I know that road pretty well. I moved to Overland Park, Kansas, during my 6th grade year, along with my brother, stepfather, and brother. The 5-story house we lived in was in a new neighborhood, and I never took the time to research the land on which our neighborhood was built. Of course, I didn't know what experiences I would find myself in throughout the next few years. My night's routine consisted mostly of sitting in the sunroom on the 4th floor that looked towards the hallway leading to the 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a linen closet, and the staircase which led to the master bedroom, while reading whatever book I had at hand. I can't recall how long it had been since my family and I moved into the house. However, I remember this night clearly. My parents went out to eat, and I stayed behind, at home. I was curled into the corner of a sofa that sat in front of a set of windows, reading Guardian by John Saul. The first incident happened well after the night sky had darkened. I was concentrating heavily on my book when I began to hear knocking coming from outside. It sounded almost exactly like someone hammering on the side of the house. Looking up from my book, I turned and looked outside to see who could be outside at such a time. However, I couldn't see anyone, so I turned around and made myself comfortable to engross myself in my book. Again, the banging continued, and the most effort I put into looking out the window again was angling my head and looking out of the corner of my eye. After a few minutes, the sound outside stopped, only to begin inside. This time, it sounded as someone was banging a hammer on the pipe in the basement, 3 floors below. The banging was 4 or 5 short clangs, and then silence. I'd raised my book again until I was interrupted by another round of clangs. The only thing I could do was try my best to ignore it. As I continued to read, I experienced this unnerving feeling of being watched. I tried to reposition myself on the couch, shifting my legs from underneath me and stretching out, but nothing would unshake the presence. I finally settled on propping my feet on the table and resting the book on my knees. It was then where I could see in my peripheral vision a man standing on the top step of the staircase leading to my parents' bedroom. He stood in complete black, perfectly still, and watched. When I looked directly at him, he disappeared. I figured all the noises in the man I saw were a result of reading the book, and because of this conclusion, I refused to look up at the staircase again, regardless of the fact that the man was still there. I never spoke of the clanging or the man once my parents came home, because I figured it was my imagination. My parents were arguing when they came home anyway, so I tried my best not to get in their way. Most of my time was spent in my room when there were others in the house. You could blame it on adolescence and wanting to be by myself. It was there in my room where another strange incident occurred. I had my radio cranked to the highest decibel and was rocking out when I heard a knock on my door. Turning down the radio, I rushed to the door and opened it to find no one standing outside. I shrugged, thinking I was hearing noises due to the loud radio, closed the door, and cranked the radio back up again. A few minutes later, I heard the knocking again, but this time, instead of turning down the radio, I opened the door while the radio blared. Again, no one stood at my door. I walked into the bathroom, which was immediately to my right, and checked behind the drawn shower curtain because my mother would love to hide and jump out behind me as I walked down the hallway. Well, she wasn't going to get me this time, only she wasn't behind the curtain. I walked down the entire hallway, checking the kitchen and bedrooms before going to my parents' bedroom. It, too, was empty, so I hightailed it to my bedroom, shut the door, and sat on my bed. I figured whoever wanted to come in would, so I no longer answered the knocks. Whoever it was knocked twice more and then stopped. Months passed, and the knockings continued, and the man stood on the top step of the staircase. After a while, I became so used to it, but I never mentioned it to anyone in my house. I always figured it was my mind playing tricks on me. Eventually, the sounds and the man disappeared, and I never experienced them again until years later. My mother and I were standing on the back porch one night while she smoked a cigarette. No one was allowed to smoke inside because my younger brother was asthmatic. While she smoked, she mentioned, "I see people in this house." I casually looked at her and replied, "You too?" I can't remember the look on her face, but the sound of her voice distinguished her fear. She told me that she continuously saw 3 people standing on the staircase leading to her bedroom. Only the people she saw were dressed in white. She said that the people she saw stood on the stairs day and night, whereas the person I saw was dressed in black and only stood at the top of the stairs at night. She told me of a night when she was smoking in the garage, and she heard a knocking on the door. Figuring it was her husband, she knocked back in return. Moments later, another knock, and she returned it, and again, until the door opened, and her husband asked why she was knocking on the door. Her answer was, "Because you were knocking." He informed her that he had been downstairs watching television. A year or so after I shared our experiences, my mother and brother, and me, of course, moved out of the house and into an apartment across the street from the neighborhood. My mother and her husband were separated, but he continuously stayed at our apartment anyway. One night, my mother decided to drive back to the house to feed our dog that we left behind at the house, while my stepfather was inside our apartment sleeping. I remained behind as well, sitting outside in the back patio. My mother was gone for 10 or 15 minutes before rushing back through the front door. The hairs on her arm were standing on edge, and she couldn't seem to collect her thoughts. She finally asked, "Do you think I'm crazy?" I laughed and asked why. She explained. While the dog was eating out in the garage, she had gone inside to close the blinds in the formal living room. While her back was the rest of the room, she heard a distant voice saying, "Get out of the house." She said she shook it off and walked up to the sunroom to close more blinds, where she again heard, "Get out of the house." Finally, while closing the blinds in the kitchen, she said that the voice was so close that she ran out of the house without closing the remaining blinds, jerked the dog into the garage, and sped back to the apartment. A year later, we moved to Georgia, where there have been no experiences in any of the houses we've resided in. I've been debating with myself as to why she and I would see people standing on the same staircase, and if their different clothing represented anything. Maybe because that's where most of my parents' fights would take place, or what was trying to get our attention by knocking on the walls. What I do know is that now that my mother is no longer married to the same man, we haven't experienced anything of the like since. Hey Phantoms, guess what? A very long video for you guys instead of the shorter ones. I never usually do over 20 minutes, so I'm very proud of myself for getting this video out to you guys. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing, because I'm assuming you're going to do that anyway, and it will make me happy. Wink, wink. Anyway, guys, seriously, guys, thank you for watching this video, for commenting as usual. I definitely want to see more of your comments, so if you haven't even commented before and you watch my channel frequently, or, enough, I'd like to hear from you. So just say hi or something, and I'll respond to you as best I can. I am actually going on vacation, so this is the big video before I go on vacation, and you guys are going to get a couple more videos after this. There'll be a compilation and a video reflection on my 4 years on YouTube. So, guys, you'll have to wait for that when that releases, but for now, we're going to enjoy this 40-minute video almost. At least I hope it's 40 minutes. And, let's reflect on an amazing adventure we've had for the past 4 years. As always, tell me which story you like the most out of all these stories. There's a bunch of them. My favorite one was the last one. It was very epic, had tons of detail, and I saved the last one for the best. So guys, I'm going to sign out. Don't forget to share this video and, just enjoy it, really. All your help means so much to me, and I couldn't do this without you guys. I made this long video because obviously you guys wanted something longer, and I'm just so proud of myself that I got some videos out for you guys before I had to leave for England. And I'll be back October 18th, but like I said, there's going to be 2 other videos while I'm away. I already have them pre-recorded and scheduled, so they should be all out very soon in the next couple weeks. So thank you guys, love you, and I'll see you in the next video.